an 8 original production.
Major funding for Stephen Caras' See Them Dance is provided by generous contributions from Susan Bloom, Nancy and Jay Parker, Sidel Meyer, Esther and Sid Dinerstein, Ed Ricci Esquire. Major corporate sponsorship is provided by Turftown Properties, Central Kentucky's luxury real estate and horse farm brokerage. Additional generous funding is provided by the following individuals: and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Dance is about movement, and photography is about freezing a moment in time.
Wow, beautiful.
But ballet in particular, there are very definite lines to stay within. An arabesque can't be bent. The legs have to be straight. Good dance photography is special because movement continues in a still image. An essence of a human being comes forward. I started off as a dancer, and then I became a photographer. Has it been rosy all the time? Oh no. Has it been easy? Far from it. But I have done what I've wanted to do, and I continue to this day. I was born in Englewood, and I grew up in Maywood, New Jersey. It was a magical setting for kids. My mother had big blue eyes and a killer sense of humor. And my father, when we were little boys, very much involved in his career and in the military. But I looked up to him and I wanted his affection.
When we were growing up, we would dance all the time. We would do the twist if that was what was happening at the time. We were always dancing.
On occasion, my mother would ask, "Would you like to study dance?" And I would always give my father's answer. Boys don't do that. I gave the answer my father wanted to hear. I didn't give the answer that I really wanted to give. I was 18 miles away from New York City, but I might as well have been on another planet because there was no exposure to dance other than on television. The first time I saw real ballet was on The Ed Sullivan Show.
And now from the New York City Ballet, Jacques D'Amboise with Caras, and they're wonderful. Let's have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
My mother would always scream from the den when I was upstairs doing my homework, "They're on." And I'd go barreling down the stairs and we'd watch them in awe and in silence and just, wow, look at them. And I thought, those are divine creatures from outer space. They're not human, they can't be. I thought ballet was a world one was born into, like royalty. I had no idea that one could learn it. When I was in 10th grade, I auditioned for Brigadoon, our high school play, and I not only made it as a dancer, they made me a solo dancer, and I was thrilled. And we did the original Agnes DeMille choreography. A person who worked directly with her came from New York to stage it on us, and he said, "Stephen, my goodness, you have this legs and feet and splits and extension, but you must study ballet as a foundation." So I went home and I said, "Mom, I'd like to study ballet now because," and I told her the story, and she was very excited. She said, "Of course." And my father was not so happy about it.
My dad, being an ex-military guy and kind of machismo kind of guy, it didn't set well with him. My father would have been more comfortable with Stephen excelling at football versus ballet, which he had no knowledge of.
Our family, being second-generation Greek, wanted so much to be American and to fit into the mold, and perhaps that's exactly where Stephen's father was coming from.
I believe that in this country, in our family, in the world at the time when Stephen was looking to be a dancer, that it was a bold move. It was a bold step.
So I started taking ballet lessons in a little school in New Jersey. And the first day I got there, there was a magazine with a picture of Robert Blankshine from the Joffrey Ballet leaping on the White House lawn in a giant split. And this answered so many questions for me. This confirmed so many things. This said, number one, there's a man in tights and he's leaping, and it's gotta be okay with the general public because he's in front of the White House. And then I went in and took the class, and between the beautiful girls and the pliés and the connection with the beautiful classical music, I knew that moment, this is what I want to be. I want to be a ballet dancer.
It's something that happens to very few individuals. When you get a calling, no matter what, come hell or high water, you're going after it, and nothing's going to stop you. And that's what happened to my brother, I feel.
So I took 2 classes a week for about 4 months. But during this period, there was a big change in my life at my high school. Being in a Broadway show was cool for the high school kids. But being a formal ballet dancer was something I really wanted to keep to myself. But word got out, and I went from being the most popular, or one of the most popular funny guys in the school, to a laughed at, bullied, made fun of person. It was very rough for me to handle, to the point where I would go home every day after school and I would just collapse. I said, "Please, Mom, don't make me go back to this high school. Please, I can't, because I want to be a ballet dancer. I know it now, and I can't handle it." I was in a diner on the highway, and the waitress had this very balletic look to her. And I asked her if she was a dancer, and she said yes. And I said, "Do you know of any great schools in New York?" She said, "The Joffrey School is the best." I got up the nerve. I found out where they were downtown in New York City. I got on the bus on a Saturday, since there was no school, and went in and walked up this staircase. It was very ominous, but I loved it. I knew where I was headed, I suppose. And I walked right into the office, and I said to the secretary, "I'm here to audition for a scholarship." So she asked me how many years I'd been studying, and I said 4. It wasn't really a lie. I could have finished and said 4 months, but I just said 4, and I left months out. And she said, you'll take the advanced class at 12:30. I went out, I got dressed, and I walked into the studio, and I was the first one there, and I sensed some great things had been happening in this room. I found myself a safe place at the bar. No one was there yet. I thought, I want to be out of the way, and the dancers started to come in. Obviously, company members from the Joffrey and other companies too, and very advanced students. And then Nureyev and Fontaine walked in the room. And then I knew I am in over my head. And the class began, and I ran around the room for an hour and a half, mimicking the dancers. It was basically a chase that I never kept up with. It was so difficult and embarrassing. So I walked back into the office, drenched with sweat. The secretary did not look up. All she said was,
The teacher feels you have no talent. No talent. No talent.
and I stood there, absorbing that. But I was thinking, what's the alternative here? It's non-negotiable. I am not going back to high school next year in New Jersey. So I thought, and then I said, is there another class I can take? And that's when she looked up at me. And she said,
There's one at 4 o'clock.
so I went out, sat down, waited until 4, and went into that class. And that was a completely different experience. That class was intermediate level. That was taught by another man. So the second time I walked into the office, she looked up again, and she said,
This teacher feels you are very talented. Very talented. Very talented.
he said, we must give him a full scholarship. So I went home, I told my parents, and the training began. And it was intense training. These teachers were very, very serious.
The studying was extremely focused on learning technique. And I think I took 4 and 5 classes a day. I mean, you had a technique class in the morning, then you had a men's class and a partnering class, and another technique class.
There was strong discipline involved in your stance and your behavior in class. There was no talking. At one point, the pianist was playing so loud, the teacher barked a real big correction across the room at me, and I said, excuse me, and he said, what? And I said, excuse me, I didn't hear you. He said, get out. I mean, it was that serious.
Boot camp. It was like boot camp.
For instance, the jumps at the end of the class, I was gasping for air, and he would scream, don't stop, don't stop, don't stop.
Constant practice, that was the thing that amazed me the most. The amount of hours and hours of hard practice. You can't do the normal things that the rest of us were doing. The prom and staying out and all the things that teenagers do, he wasn't going to be able to do.
My father was angry about this American dream gone wrong. He had no interest in my becoming a ballet dancer, especially early on. My father would not allow my mother to pick me up at the bus stop, and it was a mile and a half from the house, maybe further. So winter, spring, summer, fall, I had to walk home, and I had to walk to the bus.
Stephen was very sad when he would come home. There were times where he would come home from the city and he would be exhausted, and I remember being at the house and him dropping his bag at the front door, being very tired, and Lou being very forceful with him. Pick up your bag, you shouldn't be that tired, this is what you want to do. I do recall the tension. The tension was great.
So I'm now studying 1 year and 4 months. I had seen a performance of the New York City Ballet during that year, and I fell in love with this company. I saw the most beautiful dancing. I thought, my God, that's perfection. And I thought, that's the company in a perfect world for me. Again, I got up my nerve, and I went to the School of American Ballet, and I auditioned. And then they called me into the office afterwards, and they said, well, Stephen, you are a little overweight, you're a little heavy, and you're old, you're 16, but you show great promise. So we'll give you a year, we'll keep you in intermediate men's, and if you improve significantly, we'll let you stay. At that point in my life, I knew nothing about George Balanchine.
When George Balanchine came to America in 1934, there was no American ballet in any real sense. What ballet we had was an entirely foreign transplant, and people experienced it as that. It was a foreign novelty. It did not arise from or speak to the American experience. The unique aspect of Balanchine, his great significance, is that even though he was an émigré artist, he came to the United States and embraced America in all of its aspects. He loved the speed, the pace, the angularity of American movement, and he was determined to lay the groundwork for a genuinely American style of ballet. He did that first by starting a school, the School of American Ballet. Once he started to get the dancers he wanted to work with, he put together a series of companies, but they took shape in 1947, 1948, and then became New York City Ballet. Second of all, he created a repertory of dances that expressed his ideas about American movement and American life. Without Balanchine's having done these things, I dare say that ballet in America would still seem like a foreign transplant. Instead, now, a half century down the line, it feels like something that belongs to us, that comes out of us, and he did that.
I started to learn a lot more about Mr. Balanchine seconds after arriving at the school because it was the only topic of conversation with all of the students. It was all about this great genius, this great choreographer, this great man. And the first time I saw him was when he would appear unannounced at the studio just to sort of spot check the students and watch his teachers.
All of us students were terrified when he'd walk in the door. He'd come in for a little while, watch, and then leave, because I think he had a very good eye and knew what he wanted. As he always said, I know what I want to see on that stage.
Maybe a year or so later, if we were working on a piece of choreography and he would be hands-on with us and show me how to hold a girl and put her over her leg, my heart was pounding with him within reach of me. And looking at me and speaking to me was thrilling. It was thrilling.
You know, I always felt he was a father figure for me. He was like the father that I never had. One time I was very young, my first years, and I was walking home in the snow, and I didn't have boots on. So he picked me up, took my bag, picked me up, and carried me over the snow in the slushy streets, the snow-covered streets. You know, we were his children. We were his family.
We adored him. We loved him. We worshipped him. But it was not blind worship. It was really out of true recognition of how great he was.
Balanchine was ballet, and we were Balanchine dancers.
Over the 2 years that I was at SAB, I was completely determined that this is what I had to do and had to be. And at one point in the spring of 1969, after class I was changing in the boys' dressing room and we heard the phone ring. And the door opened and the secretary said, a phone call for Stephen Caras. And I turned to the boys and I said, it's Mr. B, I got in the company, and everybody laughed. And I got to the phone and it was Betty Cage, the company manager of City Ballet, and she said, Mr. Balanchine would like to invite you to join his company, and if you are interested, please come in on Monday and sign a contract. I couldn't believe it. I started screaming, and all the kids came out of the dressing room. What's happening? I got in the company, I got in the company.
Stephen had a meteoric rise, which I believe the family just was astonished by.
When he was accepted, I just thought, this is very big. How many people ever can get this opportunity, no matter how good they are?
He had what Mr. Balanchine wanted, which was the energy, the attack, strong technique. Balanchine wanted dancers who were interesting to look at, somebody you wanted to watch, and that was Stephen.
I'll never forget how nervous I was the first day I was to take company class with City Ballet. It was Tuesday, the day after I signed a contract. I went into the State Theater, I went up to the main rehearsal hall, and there I was amongst those dancers that I loved so much for 2 years I was watching from the audience. I found myself a place at the bar in the very back of the room, and Mr. Balanchine walked in. He clapped his hands once, and the pliés began. And then he gave a very quick tendu step. Boom, 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 boom. And then a very quick tendu jeté step. Off the ground, off the ground, off the ground. At the end of the bar, when everyone walks to the center, I stayed in the very, very, very back of the group, just to get as tiny and as invisible as I could. But Mr. Balanchine walked through the class. The waves parted. I thought, oh no, he can't be coming to me. He can't. He grabbed me. He took me by the shoulders. He walked me to the front of the room. He turned me around to face everybody. And he said, "This is our new Greek boy. We will make him strong." And they all applauded. And I thought, my goodness, he is a king and he's a daddy. He's both. With only 3 years of training, how in the world could I keep up with the best dancers in the world? My first performance was maybe 2 days after I joined the company. The first ballet that I was in was the first ballet that I saw, A Midsummer Night's Dream. And of all things to be in, it's the wedding march. And I thought, how perfect, I'm marrying this company and this world that I love so much. But they taught it to me very quickly, and within a day or two, I was on stage performing that. It's the simplest dance a corps member can do. It is so easy. It is intermediate easy, but I was petrified. One of the most beautiful girls in the company, Linda Merrill, was my first partner.
And here is this absolutely gorgeous man with a beautiful physique, beautiful legs, beautiful feet, an incredible partner, and he's dancing with me, and we're going for it. And I squeeze his hand to say, like, honey, we're going for it.
There's a big pop noise, like a, and then the curtain goes flying up and you hear, and then you see all these lights that look like diamonds, and a big cold rush of air-conditioned air hits you in the face. And there's this huge orchestra at your feet that was gigantic in sound and overpowering, and suddenly I felt so tiny and insignificant. But Linda had looked at me right before the curtain went up, and that was just what I needed to hold me through this.
I remember being in the audience and seeing Steve on stage at Lincoln Center and crying because I was so proud and just amazed at what he could do.
We leapt out of our seats, and we were applauding and thinking, am I supposed to say bravo? I think we're supposed to say that, so let's say it too. And the whole family said, bravo, bravo.
The actual time that my father admitted to Stephen how proud he was of him was many, many, many years after this particular evening at the New York State Theater.
I think ultimately he did understand. I think ultimately Lou came to the realization that this was his son and that he did love him. But I believe much damage was done long before that. I think there's lasting damage that loss of early love can never be replaced.
When I joined the company, there was a great sense of formal protocol. Balanchine's leadership flavored the entire atmosphere. You dressed appropriately if you were backstage. You dressed appropriately when we flew to another country or another city.
We were like the Argonauts on a boat, and all sharing this New York City ballet as a creative time. I mean, Balanchine would do 4 or 5 ballets a season. Robbins would be 2 or 3. It was an amazing, fecund time of rich, seated life and fabulous dances, and Balanchine every day there, and classes, and every night in the wings, watching.
When you went into class with Mr. Balanchine, you never really knew what to expect.
The bar was the fastest thing I'd ever experienced. Like 20 minutes, and it was like this. Fast. Then we went to center, and he gave combinations for the girls. And I remember standing at the bar waiting for a boys' step for about It seemed like 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden one of them went, "Hello, Mr. B, and he went, boys, girls, go away. Boys, come on. And then he gave us a step. And double tour to a Grand Plie. That was the first step. Stone cold at that point. And then, of course, towards the end of my life with him, I wouldn't want to miss one of his classes because I ended up thinking they were the best classes ever.
Or sometimes you could see a bit of the choreography he was going to put in the next ballet.
Let's say one day he was going to choreograph a variation and it had a lot of footwork, so one day he'd be working on that in class. One day he'd be working on some kind of special turns, one time jumps, a lot of port de bras.
He told many stories. He often talked about cooking. I remember one time he said, "You really need to read the Gulag Archipelago." And I said, "What? I need to read what?" No, you must read Solzhenitsyn. And I said, "I do?" He spoke every day about art and literature and philosophy and things that mattered. Our class in the morning was as much a lesson in how he wanted us to look on stage as much as how he wanted us to behave and to be.
I think that audience members that see ballet have a misconception that there is no pain and it's lovely and it's pretty and it's not difficult and it's effortless, and it's so not the case. What you see from the audience and what we're feeling are very often two very different things.
When you're a dancer, you usually take class in the morning, you rehearse during the day, and then you perform at night. And you get tired.
You might not know it, you might not even acknowledge it, but the physical rigors of, basically 7 days a week, all day long, rehearsals, classes, performance, it does take its toll.
I have had probably a file that thick at the doctor's office.
I've torn my Achilles, I've had both hips replaced.
My back, just last year, I have 3 bulging discs.
Knee injury, torn hamstring.
I have a daily routine after work of putting my ankles in ice buckets.
My knee was basically going out, and I had to take painkillers and get out there and dance with that.
My back, my neck, my hand.
I tore my ACL.
I was in a demi-solo in a ballet called Theme and Variations, and I landed on one leg and fell to the floor. It completely affected my dancing for the rest of my dancing career. It was a turning point in the wrong direction. It's one thing to become a member of a ballet company. It's another thing to last physically, but yet it's another thing entirely to make it emotionally and deal with not young enough, not thin enough, not tall enough, not high enough, not whatever enough. And that's what ballet is, and that's just physically. But what that takes on you emotionally is something else entirely.
Everything that is being told to you is basically, you're doing it wrong. So it takes a lot of courage to stand up there and accept that and say, you're right, I'm doing it wrong, and I have to fix it, and it's my job.
It's a very exacting profession. It is about being perfect. It's about turning your human body into something that is perfectly beautiful and to executing movements that are impossible perfectly.
There's no such thing as the perfect dancer, and you are striving to be this.
And there's a tremendous cost to that. You really don't value just yourself or who you are or how you feel or maybe even your humanity. But that is a cost you pay, and I would say that for some people it's worth the cost. It was for me.
It does get scary from time to time. There are a couple of ballets that I still remember. When I hear the music now, my stomach sort of goes in circles and knots.
As you're standing in the wings and the music is coming, your entrance is coming, are your toe shoes in place, are the ribbons there, your hair in place? But that's part of the excitement, is overcoming that fear and trying to meet that challenge.
It takes tremendous courage to be a dancer. It takes tremendous intestinal fortitude to go through the demands of that career. You are at every minute exposing your true self, I'm getting emotional here, to vast numbers of people who don't know you and only want you to fail. You've got to be able to step up, pick yourself up off the floor when you've fallen down, and keep going. It's a frightening thing to have to do. It's a frightening thing to have to dance.
After about 6 years of dancing with City Ballet, I was really blown out. I was emotionally and physically completely at the end of my rope. I was in the corps de ballet, but we danced 8 performances a week, and I was in 3 and sometimes 4 ballets a night. And I went to Mr. Balanchine, and I said I'd like to leave the company, and he said, don't quit. Take a leave of absence, get a job as a waiter somewhere, tell us where it is, we'll give you great tips. And then if you'd like to come back and there's room, you've left the door open. So that's what I did. I took a leave of absence. So I took class every day. I stayed in very good shape. And about 8 or 9 months later, I received a call from Lincoln Kirstein asking me to come back to the ballet. He said, Stevie, the parade passes you by very quickly. Make the decision. Don't take too much time to make the decision. So within 24 hours, I said, I'm back. I'm back. I went back because it was all I knew. All I knew. Ballet was my love, is my love. It always has been. Well, when I came back to the company, I was back in some ballets that I had been in before. But then some wonderful things took place too. Mr. Balanchine gave me a gift of the first theme in the Four Temperaments, which was sublime and a beautiful part. My favorite role in the entire repertory was Donizetti Variations. And there are 3 boys in it. And when I did come back, I noticed that 9 guys were called to learn those 3 roles, and I wasn't one of them. But when I found out his reason, it was a giant turning point in my life for me. Mr. Balanchine said, oh, well, dear, you know, you've danced the part enough. Let's let others get a chance to do it. I want to see new faces. And that was a killer comment for me to hear, because I thought at 26, if I'm an old face, this means there's a time limit on my time in this company and as a dancer. And time is also the most expensive element in a world like ballet.
Dancers have hard lives because they stop in the middle. And once they stop, they have to find a solution for the rest of their lives. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't.
You can't dance all your life, unfortunately. When you get to a certain age, in mid-30s, early 40s, it just takes too much toll on your body. And it's a young person's profession.
Finding your next path, your next life, because it's a whole new life that you have to create for yourself, is really difficult and challenging, and I think a lot of us are afraid of it.
Your identity is you, the dancer. And suddenly you stop dancing, you have no identity.
Well, I cried for about 2 weeks, and I bought a used camera, a used 35mm camera, because I had always loved taking snapshots. It was fun, and I thought, I need a hobby. And my first subjects were my friends. They were in the wings, they were on the street, they were backstage. It became something I truly loved doing. It was the beginning of something wonderful. It really was. And little did I know how much that little camera would change my life. Mr. Balanchine allowed no one to come in from any of the publications or any of the media to photograph the company. He knew it should be someone that thoroughly understood ballet. So when I asked Mr. Balanchine if I could photograph, he welcomed me into it and gave me privileged access, truly, to this private world. And I started playing with black and white film and photographing dancers from the wings in performance. I photographed them in rehearsal. I photographed them warming up. So I felt I had a potential purpose again.
And he was always around, around with a camera, always. I was like, stop it. But there he was, and you know, he was obviously very good at it, and he had a gift.
The dancers liked my pictures because they knew a family member was recording them, and they knew that I knew how they wanted to look. So they enjoyed seeing themselves from a dancer's perspective and knowing them so personally as people, but also as artists.
You always felt confident with Steve photographing you because he knew. He knew what the position should look like, and he always wanted the best for each person he was photographing.
He knew what everybody would like because he knew what the picture was supposed to be. Not just the pose, but the energy and the spirit in the picture.
Steve knew the choreography, the moment. It was just natural. We felt naturally at ease with Steve's presence, which is very important.
He was always joyous about it. It was something joyous for him to take the photos.
Martha Swope, who was the reigning photographer of the company, she taught me how to develop a roll of film and how to make a print. And in turn, I cleaned her studio for her, and I walked her dog Topo. Some of the first shots I remember printing myself in my own darkroom were of Bart Cook in Square Dance, beautiful jump, and a picture I loved of Mr. Balanchine I took backstage in Saratoga Springs. He was in his typical Western shirt, and he was thinking about something.
But we all endorsed it, and we all loved him, and we all knew that he discovered a talent, you know, another talent. And dance is not forever, as we all know. So this was something that we all agreed to allow him to be around everywhere.
Not long after I bought my first camera, we were filming ballets for PBS, and I asked Mr. Balanchine before we took that trip, I said, Mr. B, can I bring my camera and take some pictures? And he said, yes, as long as you're quiet and you stay out of the way. So I was thrilled. So in the ballets that I wasn't dancing in, I was photographing. So I was in the balcony, and I was in little nooks and crannies, and I took a bunch of pictures. A couple weeks went by, we're back in New York, and Mr. B asked if I would bring my contact sheets to his office the next day. And I said to him, well, they're not very good. They're out of focus, and some are overexposed, and some are underexposed. You really want to see them? And he said, yes, dear, please bring them in. So I brought them in the next day, and I sat with him in his office, and he started to point at them. I need 5 of this one, 10 of this one, 30 of this one. And when I heard Mr. Balanchine say, I need this picture, I need this picture, I realized I had an excuse to belong to the world that I loved for the rest of my life. And that's the day I knew I was a photographer.
The next thing is Steve has become a company photographer taking terrific pictures.
He had the advantage of being a fantastic dance photographer because he was a dancer himself. So he knew exactly from what angle to take the picture. He knew exactly when to snap. But obviously there was a gift there too. And so his pictures always ended up being superior to any other picture.
If you're somebody who has been inside these dances, who hasn't just watched them but who has executed them, then you know something that goes much deeper about their flow, about their structure. You really know not just where to point the camera and what's going to happen, but you have an instinctive sense of what moment you should try to capture.
When somebody's moving, it's very hard to catch it at the right moment. He knows the right moment. He always did. So he was a fellow dancer who had a very great eye.
A great photograph lets the subject of the photograph live, and you see that in Steve Caras's work. The lushness and sensuality of his photographs draw us in as viewers, allowing us to be in that exact moment.
When you look at old photographs of Nijinsky, for example, even though they give you some sense of what he must have been like, they feel static. The shutter speeds were slow, there was no possibility of shooting in a performance setting. When you see a photograph like this, it is as though you've just looked up from your program and suddenly this moment is there before you.
You feel the performance in his photographs. You take one look at a Steve Caras photograph and you know what it is to dance.
Part of it is because he knows them. Then he has this opportunity to really get to the soul.
When dancers are photographed, the passion comes through and you feel their life, you feel their breath, you feel why they are so passionate about what they do. And it's contagious.
We gain an excitement from looking at photographs of dance because we are constantly brought back to this feeling of excellence. It takes us to where beauty, grace, agility all come together. Looking at photographs of dance brings us to another place. Within Steve Caras's archive, we are embracing many technological advances. We see his very early work in black and white, done under available lighting. He then moves to studio work in color, and he is now working in digital format. But his early work is on film, which is very important for a research archive. What photographers normally retain with their digital files is only their best images. With film, you have complete sequences. You see process, you see progress. We see sketchbooks within film that we will miss in the digital age. One of the most important components of Steve Caras's archive is that we can follow the career of certain dancers, such as Baryshnikov. Early on, we see him in 1979 and 1980 under Balanchine's influence, dancing Apollo as a young man. Later on, we see him in his dance A Cloud in Trousers. We see a much more mature Baryshnikov, brilliant in his stance and in his definitive movements. In Steve Caras's photograph of Suzanne Farrell in Vienna Waltzes in 1979, we see a dancer at the peak of her performance. She is elegant, she is elongated, the sweep of her gown is stunning. But in this photograph, we have a record of this very moment for posterity.
He's very interested in those transitional areas, the wings, the studios, the hallways, between the stage and preparation for the stage.
That is the ultimate privileged view, the thing that we never get to see out front.
You're putting your toe shoes on, you're getting yourself ready, you're doing the makeup. So your appreciation may be of the dance, the leaps, and everything that's going on the stage, but he wants everyone to appreciate what happened to get them to the stage as well. I like that. One of my favorite shots is of Gelsey Kirkland in an ABT class. The potential revealed in that photograph is enormous. It harkens to what will come in her future. Some of the most important photographs in Steve Caras's archive are of George Balanchine interacting with the dancers. When he is showing them a gesture, when he is showing them a move, you can hear him speaking. And it's a reflective moment that he captures when Suzanne Farrell is portrayed in the wings.
And when you see a photograph like this, you think you know the person in it because some part of their essence is coming through the image.
Steve Caras's career spanned it all. He was there, he did it. It's on film, it's in prints. It's a cultural legacy that will be available for generations to come.
In the early 80s, Mr. Balanchine was there, but we all knew that he was feeling under the weather. And no one discussed it much, but still there was an air of concern for Mr. B.
But I know that as he grew more ill, he was there less and less. And at first it was very difficult for everyone because they remembered him being there all the time.
We sort of knew that it was getting towards the end, When Mr. Balanchine's health started to fail, it was devastating. And to see somebody start to disintegrate like that was heartbreaking.
Well, they were devastated. They were in despair because the company was George Balanchine. And for many people, dance was George Balanchine.
The last night of our spring season in 1982 was July 4th. Traditionally, Mr. Balanchine would bow once a year, and at everyone's encouragement. I wasn't dancing that night, so I was out front with my camera, and I took the closest seat to the edge of the stage on what would be audience right or stage left. Well, the ballet was beautiful, and at the very end, the crew normally turned the stage lights down. It would be very black in the stage, and Mr. B would appear in front of the audience. But for some reason, they left all of the stage lights on, and it was extremely bright.
And there are several of us dancers off stage applauding him. He's holding the curtain, and it looks like he's pulling it back, but he was actually holding on because his balance was so bad that he was very frail, and bouquets were being thrown to him, and the house jumped to its feet and was screaming, and it was a cheer, the likes of which I hadn't ever heard. It was like a rock concert.
But I was staggered when I saw this photograph. I thought, this must be, in a way, the perfect photograph. It is the right man at the right moment, pointing the camera in the right direction, and telling the entire story of the moment through the image.
This photo is probably going to become the most famous photograph ever in the world of dance.
I happened to be in the right place at the right time and take this photograph. I'm so glad I was there because it's my favorite picture, and no one's dancing in it.
Everyone knew that it was a matter of time, and especially when he went to the hospital.
Mind you, I'd been going to the hospital. I said, "Oh, Mr. B, how am I ever going to be there without you?" And he said to me, "You must listen to Peter now, because I can't do for you anymore, dear."
Barbara Horgan, Balanchine's longtime secretary, called me, and she said to me, "He's gone." And I said, "Oh my God." And she said, "Why don't you come to the theater in a couple of hours?" And so a number of us met at the theater like 6 o'clock in the morning. The big question was, should we do the matinee? And somebody asked me, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think we have to dance." That's what he would have wanted. We have to go out and dance, and we have to do our best.
Everything went on. Everything went on because we all felt that that's what Mr. Balanchine would want.
And then the ceremony, with hundreds of people packed in a very hot church. It was one of the most memorable and touching experiences of my life.
Every time we lose a being, the world changes. But to lose a being who raised you, like he did with Stephen and many of us, he raised us, we were all his people.
I was born as an artist. I was confirmed as a dancer. What I wanted to be the day I saw that picture at that ballet school in New Jersey. I said, I will be a ballet dancer. Mr. B made that happen for me. He taught us dignity, respect, protocol, manners, humor, music. He was everything to anyone who was a part of that world in my time. To me, personally, he saved me from drowning. When I left the company, it was because Mr. Balanchine had passed away. And now I'm being hired by major publications and other dance companies.
It's very hard for a dancer to do a photo shoot. You get very stiff because, you have to hold the poses. But with Stephen, it was just moving and fun, and we laughed. It was like dancing. And that for a dancer is magical. And I just cracked up, smile, and he took the picture, and that's the one that they chose for the cover of Dance Magazine, to my surprise.
He has impeccable timing. He knows the height of your battement. He knows the height of the position. in the studio and in performance. It's unbelievable what he can capture because of his sense of timing.
And I mean, that is a split second. It's a pose that's hit for a second or two, and then it moves on. But the lighting and everything, the way he was able to capture it was, yeah, spectacular.
He did photo shoots out on the beach, on a seawall. And I think he also trusts that if you have something to offer, he will take that in and respond to it so that you're working together as part of the process.
When I met Steven, I knew his strength was ballet, and I helped encourage him to look beyond that. He started expanding his horizons a little bit. He was able to see what, other choreographers were able to do in the modern genre, the contemporary genre.
It's very hard for photographers to grab images of Streb. What Streb's subject actually is action. And the implementation of action, the demonstration of action, and the presentation theatrically of action. Steven was all over the place. I think he got inside of the work that we were doing. I was in rapture, number one, when I saw the photographs that Steven had taken. And not only that, I wanted them.
That was probably one of my most favorite photo shoots that I've ever done. I love these pictures because he captured an essence of who I am, not only as a mover, but as a dreamer. His work is just extraordinary, and it stands apart.
If Lou was here, I'd say, well, Dad, look at your son. Look at your son.
In my sphere, I would call Steve a Renaissance man. He knows music, he knows ballet, and he's a photographer, he's a speaker, he's a motivator, his classes are incredible.
I think he's among the best because he was a professional dancer. And that gave him the upper hand over everybody else.
The dance world is lucky to have Steve in it.
I believe he's the greatest dance photographer that has ever lived. This will be, as he continues to photograph, one of the most extraordinary dance archives of the 20th and into the 21st century.
If I could, I'd just walk through a world of Steve Caras' photographs every day.
funding for Stephen Caras' See Them Dance is provided by generous contributions from Susan Bloom, Nancy and Jay Parker, Sidel Meyer, Esther and Sid Dinerstein, Ed Ricci Esquire. Major corporate sponsorship is provided by Turftown Properties, Central Kentucky's luxury real estate and horse farm brokerage. Additional generous funding is provided by the following individuals: and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.